Happily, we have enough seats for everybody. Glad you're here. Thank you for braving the elements. I'm Evan Smith, the CEO of the Texas Tribune. We welcome you here to the Austin Club as often as we can to be present for the events that we put on as part of our awesome mission. Now more than 8 years in business, we've been trying to get the public better informed and engaged in the conversation about the issues that matter to all of us, not just at election time, but always. And so this is one of about 50 events that we do over the course of the year around the state. And we do maybe about 20 or so here at the Austin Club. We are now at the beginning of the end. I don't mean that existentially, although if you look out at the world, you might think that I did mean it existentially. This is the last 2-week sprint for the Tribune and the events that we put on during the year. We actually have 5 events between now and the end of next week. I'll tell you about those in a second. And then by about the end of next week, like most of you, we'll begin to wind down significantly for the balance of the calendar year and then come back roaring after the first of the year. We, in fact, already have an event planned for January that we just posted this morning. I'll tell you about in a second. And obviously, the election season will provide us with lots of opportunities to gather together and talk about the big things that matter. And then we'll get past that and then get into the general election. And then suddenly it'll be the 2019 Texas legislative session just around the corner. I'm a masochist. I can't wait. Best free entertainment in the world when they're back. And so lots to do and lots to talk about. These events are free to attend. I think you know that. We're very pleased to have you here. We provide the coffee. We provide the venue. We invite you to join us, but they're not free to put on, and they're not free in 2 ways. First of all, a lot of effort goes into the work that we do at the Tribune, and the people who do the work, as is the case at many organizations, don't get ample credit. Agnes Varnum, who runs our events, along with Jessica Weaver, really managed this great effort. John Jordan, Jake Sam, Rebecca Quarles, everybody from the Texas Tribune who do not get adequate credit but do the work. Would you please acknowledge them for all that they do? Whole operation exists on their backs, and we thank them not nearly enough publicly for what they do. The second thing I'll say is that we have sponsors who support these events and allow them to be free. We have series sponsors, folks who we take around the state with us as brands that support the Tribune's mission by way of supporting our events. BP, AT&T, PepsiCo, Walmart, and Southwest Airlines are the sponsors of the Tribune's events. Please give them a hand as well and acknowledge their generous support. Those sponsored dollars make it possible for the Tribune to do all that it does over the course of the year, not just events, but the wonderful reporting that our staff does. Still the largest newsroom covering a state capital of any news organization in the country right here in Austin, Texas, as well as the work that we do providing you with databases of public information and data visualizations that tell a story through a different door. All that work that we do is made possible by sponsors. It's also made possible by members. And there are many people I know in the room who've supported the Tribune as members over the years or every year. We appreciate you absolutely if you're a member of the Tribune. You can certainly become a member if you're not one. Rebecca Quarles is here and would be happy to sign you up, give you a baseball cap to take home. End of year giving season is upon us. If you have a few dollars and you're thinking about how to divvy those up among good organizations, there are certainly lots of great causes out there to support. I would observe simply that within the universe of public media, and particularly nonprofit news, this is a now more than ever moment to support the kind of work that we do. We've been doing real news, not fake news, for more than 8 years. And if you're looking for a place to go, you know that the Texas Tribune is going to provide you with reliable information that allows you to be a better and more productive citizen. And so we hope that you'll consider supporting us as a member. So the events I mentioned, this is one of 5 that we have between now and the end of next week. We have this morning's wonderful event with Mr. Milder, who we'll bring up here in a second. Tomorrow will be, some of us will be in Corpus Christi all day at the Texas A&M University, Corpus Christi, a symposium on rebuilding the Gulf Coast after Hurricane Harvey. And it's a fantastic program that includes, among others, State Representatives Todd Hunter, Abel Herrero, and J.M. Lozano, Senator Chuy Hinojosa, Commissioner John Sharp, the Chancellor of the A&M system, who was appointed by Governor Abbott to lead the Rebuild Commission, Laura Huffman, who runs the Nature Conservancy in the state of Texas, Beth Van Dyne, the former mayor of Irving, who is the HUD administrator for this part of the country under Secretary Ben Carson. Really a wonderful program, and I encourage you, if you can't be there, to check it out online. We'll be live streaming the entire event. Tuesday, we'll be on the campus of Texas State University over the lunch hour with State Representatives Kyle Biederman and Jason Isaac to look back at the 85th legislative session and ahead through the interim and the election season to the 2019 session. That's over the lunch hour, December 12th. Back here next Thursday morning, 1 week from today, with the relatively new president of Baylor University, Linda Livingstone. That ought to be a great conversation about a great many things, higher ed related and not. And I look forward to having you here for that. And then finally, next Friday morning in Dallas at the Communities Foundation of Texas headquarters, a breakfast conversation with Senators Royce West and Connie Burton, similar to the one that we'll do on Tuesday in San Marcos, talking about the 85th session and looking ahead to the legislative session. I've got myself tied up here. All of those conversations will be live streamed, and in part, let me observe that what you provide to us in the way of support through membership in the Tribune is the ability for us to provide these events to you remotely. If you're away from the event and you want to come and be part of it, you can be part of it through your mobile device or through your computer. So please think about all of that, texastribune.org/events. I mentioned we had one event on the calendar for January. On January the 11th, which is a Thursday morning, Andrew White, who as of about a few hours from now will be a declared candidate for governor of Texas, a Democrat, the son of the former Governor Mark White, who is announcing for governor today, will be here on the 11th of January. We have extended an invitation to Sheriff Lupe Valdez of Dallas County, who announced, as you know, yesterday. We expect her to be here during the month of January as well. So please keep an eye out for those events, and we'll look forward to welcoming you back. Turn your phones to silent for the benefit of the people in the room and not in the room. If you want to tweet about this event, you're certainly welcome to do that. The hashtag is TT Events. We'll do the usual 40 minutes of conversation. Balance of time, your questions have you out of here by 9. Okay? Now it's my pleasure to introduce this morning's guest, Scott Milder, a Republican candidate for Texas Lieutenant Governor in 2018. Mr. Milder will square off against the incumbent, Dan Patrick, in the March primary. A former two-term member of the Rockwall City Council, Mr. Milder is the co-founder of the nonprofit organization Friends of Texas Public Schools. A senior associate at Stantec Architecture, an international engineering and design firm, he previously served as a principal at Cambridge Strategic Services and as the public information officer for the Galena Park Independent School District. Born in New York, which I can testify is not a fatal condition, but raised in Austin, Mr. Milder has undergraduate and master's degrees from the University of North Texas. Please join me in welcoming Scott Milder. Mr. Milder, thank you for being here.
All right, thank you.
Good to see you. Thanks for making time for us today.
You bet.
Are you running for something or against something?
Yes.
Yes, both.
Yes.
You understand that that is the question asked of somebody who is either bold enough or foolish enough, depending upon which side of the line you're on, to challenge an established incumbent in office. And that is what you were doing with Dan Patrick. It's one thing to challenge, say, a first-term incumbent in a Texas House. It's another thing to challenge the almighty and all-powerful and well-funded and well-known Lieutenant Governor of Texas. So let's talk about why you're doing this. Let's make the case for you before we make the case against him, which you don't seem to need much prompting to do. I do read your Twitter feed.
Right.
It's relentless. Why you? What made you decide to do this, and why are you the guy?
Well, I guess the question is, why not me, and who else? You know, I've thought for a long time that somebody needed to challenge Dan Patrick, and I really thought somebody would. But as time rolled on through 2017, no one was emerging to challenge him. And
right.
And there are a lot of Texans out there who would like to see a change in our lieutenant governorship.
Well, again, that gets to the case against. I want to come back to the case for, because you can't beat somebody with nobody, and you are putting yourself forward as a somebody. And for the benefit of people who do not know who you are, who have not heard of you, and do not know your story, make the case for you. What makes you qualified to run, and why did you decide to run? What are you trying to accomplish?
Well, I'm a rational Republican. I've been conservative my whole voting life.
Been a Republican always?
Always.
Ever vote for a Democrat?
I don't believe so. Never have. No, never have. I'll tell you, my dad did. We had arguments over that, but you know, that's how it goes at the dinner table.
So you're a rational Republican.
Rational Republican. That's exactly right. I'm a regular Texan. I'm a working Texan. I ironed my own shirt this morning. I've got some good experience I think I can bring to the table, and certainly as much or more experience than Dan Patrick had when he first came on the scene 12 years ago. I've got a couple of terms on the local city council.
So you've been in government?
Been in government, local government, and in that 4 years, we have strict term limits. 3 2-year terms is all you can run for.
Right.
In Rockwall, and in that 4 years, I learned an awful lot about municipal governance, local governance, what the state versus local government.
Right.
And
now, Rockwall's a pretty small community.
It is about 40,000 residents.
Right, but the reality is there are a lot of communities of that size in Texas.
Yes,
and so
absolutely.
when you serve on the council in a community of that size,
Right.
you are seeing what most of Texas sees.
Absolutely.
You're dealing with what most of Texas deals
That's
with
exactly right.
in the way of issues.
Exactly right.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Education has been something I mentioned. Friends of Texas
Yes.
Public Schools, come to that in a second. That is of interest to you, but you're not necessarily running only as an education guy.
No, absolutely not.
Right. Because the job is about so much more than that.
Yeah, I mean, there's so many issues, so many pressing matters that we've got to tackle as a state.
Right.
Oh my God, transportation is a huge issue. Just getting down here from Dallas to see you this morning,
Right.
Is a chore.
Yeah.
And so we've got to focus on all those pressing issues that, frankly, our Senate hasn't been focused on under Dan Patrick's leadership.
Now the question will happen, of course, in a case like yours, where you've done a little bit of service on the city council in a community like Rockwall. You've been in business. You've been an advocate on an issue like education. But really, do you know enough about the issues that the Lieutenant Governor's portfolio contains? Do you know enough about these bigger topics, transportation, immigration? What do you know about health care? What do you know about not just, public ed, you seem pretty well versed on that, but what do you know about higher ed? I understand that in some circles, experience is a liability these days, but I'm going to be a traditionalist and say, it helps to know something about the job that you're running for and about the issues that you'll manage. What do you say to people who ask whether you're qualified for this job in terms of your experience?
Well, I'll say that I've always followed government.
Yeah.
I read the news. I keep up with current events. I am a quick study, learning a lot more than I ever knew.
Right.
About how Texas runs, and I think it's time. I think it's time that we have a regular Texan insert into our Texas legislature to focus on the issues that really matter to Texans, and I am grounded in those issues because I am one of those regular Texans.
Right. And so your goal would be, if you're doing the elevator pitch to a potential donor or a potential voter, Republican or Democrat in this race, your elevator pitch to that person in terms of the things you want to accomplish
Sure.
is what?
Boy, I'll tell you one thing is property tax relief. That's a huge issue, and I don't think the Senate in particular, I don't think has tackled that with real sincerity. I think we need to tackle it with sincerity. I think it's a multi-tiered approach. It's not just a one quick solution. We've certainly got to fix our public education funding system. Public education funding is down. We lose funding every year with each passing year with when you account for inflation and everything else and enrollment growth. Infrastructure. We have water shortage needs in many areas of Texas, and in some cases we have overages of water, like we experienced this year. And so I think we need to look at some emergency preparedness, particularly along the Gulf Coast. And then I think we need to make sure that everything we do gets put through the filter of pro-business, policy-minded thinking.
Which is to say, help ensure that the economy is strong and that the legislature and the laws it passes and the policy it puts forward is working on behalf of making the economy strong.
Absolutely, that's exactly right.
Right.
Yeah, we need that pro-business policy that encourages job creators to move to Texas.
Now, you've identified what you would say are problems or opportunities, but do you have solutions for these things? When you say we need to adequately fund public schools, what does that mean exactly, specifically, and where's the money going to come from?
Right. Okay. So, I'm not advocating for tax increases. I think we've got
tax increases off the table.
Yes, I'm not advocating for tax increases. I think the revenue is all there. It's a matter of priorities and where we're placing the money. We have new revenue every year due to growth and revenue and such. Right. And I think a lot of that is not being allocated to the various issues that need to be addressed. And for example, over the last 30 years, since bring up public education has dropped. The state's funding share of education was 68% back in the 1980s, and today it's 38%.
Right.
And what's happened is that's created a huge burden on local taxpayers. Those local taxpayers are picking up the slack where the state has been slowly reducing its share of funding.
So I've read where you've said, among other things, that property tax relief to the state of Texas should mean reducing the burden on local taxpayers who are increasingly funding public education and shifting that responsibility back to the state.
Right.
But I ask you again, where's the money going to come from? The state budget, while revenues are growing and while the state budget is larger today than it was, say, 10 or 20 years ago, the fact is that money is being spent on other things.
Absolutely.
In order for you to spend more on public ed, you're going to have to spend less on other things. Name those other things. What would you cut to spend more money on public education?
Well, I'm not, you know what, I'm not ready to say what I would cut. I think
Why not? You're ready to run for lieutenant governor. Shouldn't you be ready to say what you're going to do?
Well, you know what, I'm not going to throw out solutions there that aren't there. I don't have the benefit of being in there yet. And so we need to get people together and look at the whole tax revenue structure, and then look at all the different pieces that are funded, and then take some time to prioritize and allocate those new revenues that come in, not from tax increases, but just from our growth, economic growth.
Mr. Malda, I mean,
yes.
With respect, you understand that the problem when someone is running who has no experience in government, really, for voters who are considering whether to cast a vote, is that you say, okay, you've identified what problems are, that's free, that's easy, give us solutions, that's harder. And it sounds like, at least for now, you're not willing to say where you would cut to do what is arguably your number one priority as a candidate, and that's to increase public education spending. You won't say where you're going to get the money from.
No, I'm not ready to say that at all.
Do you have a sense of how much money you're looking for? If you won't say where it's coming from, how much more in public education spending do you think the state needs to commit to?
You know, I think it needs to be more than 38%, because as a homeowner, my property taxes are going up, and I'm paying my school bill. Every year my school bill is going up, but my school is not seeing those additional dollars. They're getting recaptured by the state and put in the general fund.
Okay, so you're opposed to recapture?
You know what? Generally, I would say I am opposed to recapture as a revenue stream for the state of Texas. I think we need to figure out what is the fair, what does it cost to educate a child, figure out what that is, and then figure out how we get every school district up to that minimum level, that minimum standard of funding. That's what we've got to do. And then we've got to identify where those funding sources come from. And it's not a quick solution. I mean, it's going to have to be a long-term solution.
Well, in fact, we've never been able to adequately fix this. Is like it's like Groundhog Day, right? Every session we come back and we right, we revisit this question of why the system doesn't work. We put a Band-Aid on it or a gauze bandage on it, and then it suddenly pops off, and we're back to the same conversation. So, if you won't tell me how much money we need or where we're going to come from, can you at least give me a sense of what your school, the milder plan for fixing school finance would be? Leaving money, the specific money out of it, what would you do to fix the system? If recapture's not working, what would be your plan?
Yeah, well, first of all, I would prioritize school funding. I would take vouchers off the table. I'd make it a priority for the legislature to really look at it meaningfully, to figure out a long-term solution to fixing the funding formula. The formula is broken. There's been no new revenue for well over 10 years to our public schools, and so the fact that revenue is always going to be a problem, but we've got to figure out, okay, what is our goal for funding and fixing public education funding, and then figure out a plan to get there.
But of course, the legislature would say, members of the legislature would say that over time they have attempted what you're proposing, or have talked in the same way that you're talking about the need to fix the system, and have not been able to do it. What makes you more confident than they have been in the past about being able to solve this problem when it hasn't been solved for decades?
Well, I feel like one of the things I've learned in my short time on council and in my business career is that I've become very good at finding common ground and working with multiple perspectives. And I think it's very important that we work together to come up with a solution. I think the legislature has been polarized of late, and frankly hasn't had much of an interest in fixing. And unfortunately, the nature of the beast is we want to just get through each biennium. There's not a long-term solution ever proposed, because a lot of our elected officials, not all of them, but many of our elected officials are just simply worried about getting through this session and re-election.
Just a couple of years. I presume, since you're running for lieutenant governor, that you have an interest in the legislature, and so you paid attention during this last session to the discussion about school finance.
Sure.
So there was the Huberty approach, called the Huberty approach, and then there was a Larry Taylor / Dan Patrick approach. Which of those two school finance funding plans did you prefer?
Huberty's.
You did?
Yeah, absolutely.
Why are you not running for state representative and therefore speaker or chairman of public ed then? If you like the House plan better, why are you trying to go to the Senate?
Because nothing's going to change as long as we have our current lieutenant governor where he is. He's a polarizing figure.
Right.
And
so you're going to bring a little bit more like the House version of the world or view of the world to the Senate. That's what you're hoping
absolutely.
to do.
That's my plan.
Right.
Yes, sir.
You know how popular the House is in the Senate, don't you?
Sure. Sure. And, you know, I think it's mutual.
You got a death wish, don't you, Mr. Wilder?
Yeah. Some might say that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Is
Yeah.
the public education system in Texas working well as far as you're concerned? Leaving the finance piece out of it for the moment, although you might say and others might say that you can't talk about quality and performance without talking about finance.
Sure.
Do you believe that public schools in Texas are doing a good job?
I think our public schools are doing remarkably well in spite of the many challenges.
Under the circumstances.
Under the circumstances.
Right.
Yeah, and every year they figure out how to get along and open the school doors with just a little bit less.
Right.
Accommodate the growth, accommodate whatever needs that they have, the additional unfunded mandates, and they still open the school doors every day, and kids are getting a solid education.
Is there anything they can do better in your mind?
Anything our schools can do better?
Yeah.
Oh, absolutely. I think so. I think many schools have figured this out. I think some schools need to still figure it out, but some of our school programs are maybe still 20th century thinking. They need to be more student-centered than adult-centered in some of our schools. Frankly, I think the state needs to take a good look at the curriculum and see because the curriculum hasn't changed a whole lot in many, many years. I think we need to look at modernizing our curriculum some and decide whether or not some of the programs in our schools that have been there forever and ever are really relevant in today's world.
So you have a realistic view of public ed. You're a public ed supporter, but you're not blind to the fact that things can be better. This organization that you and your wife co-founded, Friends of Texas Public Schools, exists in part to support public schools by putting out the idea that public schools deserve our appreciation and respect and support over time. But it's not a boosterish organization in the sense that you don't acknowledge that there's work that can be done to make
No, exactly. Better. That's right. Yeah. We predominantly started Friends of Texas Public Schools just out of the horrible lack of respect that particularly our state leaders give our people who are serving in our public schools. And these are good, kind-hearted people who all get in the profession to teach, whether they're teaching or being a counselor or a principal or a superintendent. They all started out teaching. Right. And it's a crime that we're demonizing these good people who are trying to do their best for our kids in our public schools.
Right. So just so we're clear, we'll move on from this. You're acknowledging then that money in the form of a fix to the school finance system is not the only answer.
Oh, no, not
to
at all.
making public education better.
Not at all.
Right.
Not at all. But we need to free them up to teach.
Right.
We need to let them teach. We need to let them lead in their local communities.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What's wrong with school choice or vouchers? Pick whichever way you want to describe the program that's been proposed on the Senate side and found no support on the House side each of the last three sessions. Yeah. You know there's an ongoing conversation about school choice or vouchers. To the extent that there was a serious discussion about school finance last session, it died in part because there was an unwillingness by the House to accept what the Senate wanted to do in the form of a modest voucher program. Yeah. In all likelihood, the math in the House and the composition of the House is not going to change dramatically enough that this conversation is going to go any differently next time. Right. But you know this is a live issue, and if you're leading the Senate, it's going to be a live issue for you as Lieutenant Governor. What's your problem with school choice?
I don't have a problem with school choice at all.
What do you have a problem with?
What I have a problem with is public officials, like our Lieutenant Governor, who's leading this charge in diverting public dollars and public resources into private institutions with absolutely no accountability.
So you oppose the voucher program that was in play because the dollars would leave the public education system but without accountability.
That's right. Yeah. Taking dollars out of our public education system is not going to help our public education system.
So what if there was accountability? What if those dollars left, but by virtue of those dollars leaving, any school that received a student and a voucher would be required to live under the same accountability rules as the public schools? How would you feel about it then?
It wouldn't matter because the voucher program wouldn't work because the schools accepting the voucher wouldn't accept the strings along with them.
Right. So as a practical matter, you don't think...
I don't think that's a possibility.
Right.
Yeah.
Do you think that, are you in the camp of those who say that taking money out of the public schools to give parents a chance to walk across the street ultimately defunds public education?
It absolutely defunds.
Yeah.
and it divides. It creates a bigger divide between the haves and have-nots, and that's not fair to the majority of our students in Texas. We're majority minority, majority low income, low socioeconomic status, and so that's just not fair at all. Because a voucher's going to be what, $5,000 or $6,000,
Right.
you know? So I could take that $5,000, $6,000 and apply it towards the local private institution. That's $15,000.
Right.
But the kids that they're purporting to be saving with vouchers can't afford the balance of the tuition to go anywhere, and they won't have transportation to get there. And frankly, it takes resources away from our public schools that are doing well.
Yeah.
And you know what, we need to wrap our arms around those schools and help them continue to improve rather than try to hobble them by taking money and students away from our public schools. And by the way, there is plenty of choice in our public schools today.
Yeah, you said I'm for school choice. So when you say I'm for school choice, that I'm opposed to vouchers, where along that continuum do you live?
Right, yeah. I mean, we have a lot of choice now. We have a private school system, we have a charter school system, we have a homeschool system, we have virtual school systems, and then even within our public school systems, we have all kinds of choices. In my hometown, we're building a careers academy high school where you can make the choice to apply to go there and learn trades and professions and get a head start on college. And so there's a lot of choice already. So many districts are open enrollment. If you don't like the elementary school that you're zoned to, which 95% of people do, then you're welcome to enroll in another school.
Right, but there are options available under the headline of school choice to certain people based on the resources that they are fortunate enough to have, and not available to others. If Dan Patrick were sitting here, as he has in the past, he might say, what do you have against poor people having the same opportunity for their kids that wealthier people do?
I've got nothing at all against that, but the reality is...
Why should a rich person be able to send his kid to a private school but not a poor person? That's what Dan Patrick has said. Not only would he say it, he has said it.
Yeah, well, and on the surface that sounds reasonable. When you dig down an inch or two deeper, you realize it's showboating is what he's talking about. He's trying to get an issue passed for the sake of passing an issue. And the reality is...
You don't think he's sincere in believing that poorer families should have the same opportunity as wealthier families?
Not one bit.
Okay, well, we'll come to your personal feelings about Dan Patrick in a second, because you have those. That's what I would describe as the Scott Spicier as opposed to Scott Milder part of our conversation.
It's
we'll
not
get
the milder. Yeah.
Other than education, the other issue that you have made front and center of your campaign, to the degree that it's been up and running so far, has been this bathroom legislation that we spent time talking about last issue. You talked about the economic climate of the state. You have often said online and elsewhere that you objected to the bathroom bill from a business case standpoint.
Yeah, I did.
Talk about that.
Sure. Actually, before the legislature took this up as an issue, our own city council took it up as an issue. Our mayor brought it before council. He wanted to pass a bathroom ordinance in Rockwall, Texas, and it died for lack of a second. We had many business leaders in town just say, you know what, this is a discriminatory policy. It's going to make it harder for us to hire people and excel and succeed in business. And frankly, and again, on the surface, when he first brought it up, I thought, oh yeah, that sounds reasonable. You know, men should go to the men's room and women should go to the women's room. But then when you dig a little deeper and you do a little research into it, you realize it's a solution without a problem. And we have plenty of laws on the books already to address lewd behavior.
So you believe that there is not an epidemic of a sort of men and women's bathrooms that would make it necessary for us to pass such legislation?
That would be accurate. Yes. Yeah.
And you believe that there is already a criminal justice solution to such a problem were one to exist?
Correct.
Right.
Yes, there are plenty of laws on the books. To govern lewd and assault type behaviors in bathrooms.
Right. Now, it's a bathroom. It's an economic case. Pardon me, that caused you to oppose the bathroom bill. Right.
Well, it's two. It's economic, and I don't believe in passing laws for the sake of passing laws when there's not an issue that it needs to address.
But Mr. Milder, what this is not for you is an issue that you oppose on the grounds that it discriminates. I mean, there are people who object to this bathroom legislation for different reasons. They object on the business case. See Speaker Strauss.
Right.
Although that's not the only reason they object.
Sure.
There are people who believe that it's an unnecessary law, that we should be passing fewer laws and not more laws. Okay.
Sure.
But then there are an awful lot of people who objected to this legislation because they believe that it discriminated against transgender Texans. Whether that was the intent or not, that was the practical effect.
Sure.
My understanding is that you're not concerned about the transgender community as it relates to this issue.
You know what? I honestly, I don't have any sympathies for the transgender community or any other special interest community.
Well, in fact, I'll read your own words back to you.
Okay.
This is an opinion piece that you published.
Yes, you did your research. Yes.
I
Yes.
do have a job.
Yes. I don't know how you do it.
I better be good at it.
Yeah.
These are your own words on this issue. Quote,
good.
I am not sympathetic to the transgender agenda,
Correct.
nor any agenda seeking special treatment for special interests under the law. This before
Right.
all those smart-ass West Austin Democrats who like to cross over in primaries vote for you because they think, oh, we like him better than Dan Patrick. They
right.
should know
That was a while back.
But a while, but you own it still. I mean, I don't care how long ago it was. You own it.
Yeah, I still own it. Sure.
You still don't believe that the transgender community has a legitimate beef with this bill?
Well, sure, they've got a legitimate beef.
I thought you weren't sympathetic to the transgender agenda. Which is it?
Well, they can have a legitimate beef without me being sympathetic to it.
Right.
Yeah, that's all I'm saying with that statement.
Right.
Yeah, I mean everybody can have a legitimate beef about anything, and I respect
But
any
you
Texans.
don't believe that this bill discriminates against the transgender community?
Oh well, it probably does. It does. It's a.
You sound kind of sympathetic to the
Well,
agenda.
you know what? I'm not. Yeah. Oh my gosh. Yeah.
You could have just stayed in Rockwall. Apparently, the traffic
it's
was
a tough.
bad coming down here.
Yeah,
I'm
it was
sorry.
tough.
Okay.
It was tough. Yeah.
All right. What are you prepared? Let's talk about we know what you're not prepared to do as far as the business community goes, which is you think this is a bad bill. What are you prepared to do? What do you think that the state should do, can do from the standpoint of propping up the business community and making the economy healthier? Are you for your economic incentives? Mm-hmm. Talk about the many things that are typically in play in a job like the one you're seeking.
Well, I support aggressive economic development programs and investing in them wherever we can. I think that's important. I think the most important thing we can do is listen to our business community. I think they have a lot of really great insight into how to bring other businesses. I think they have a lot of connections to other businesses all over the country, frankly, all over the world. And we need to reach out to them and engage them in our economic development programs.
Right.
And when they come as a group, as a large group of people, a large industry, and they come and plead with our legislature for one way or another on a particular issue, I think we ought to listen to them.
So if the business community says we need to steer a moderate course on immigration, or if the business community says we need to be more aggressive in funding public education or creating opportunities for kids to get through high school and get on to college and produce the next workforce for the state of Texas, or if they come to the legislature and they say, we think that this bathroom legislation is not good for Texas, you say we should follow where the business community goes.
Well, not blindly. I mean, we need to
on which
listen
you
and take into
disagree?
consideration.
Are there any issues on which you disagree with the business community?
Oh, I'm sure there are, but nothing comes to mind that
Can't
I
think
disagree
of one
with.
right now.
No, I mean, no. I just, aside from the perception of greed, and I think they're unfairly demonized, frankly. Every industry has its bad apples, but I think there are a lot of really good people in the business community who want to do right by Texas and are actually willing to pay taxes.
Right.
And so when we're talking about cutting taxes and cutting business taxes, I don't know necessarily the lion's share of businesses out there are asking for that necessarily. I think they want to do their part to help Texas.
You're opposed to cutting corporate taxes?
No, I wouldn't. I'm not opposed to it. No, I'm not.
But you don't think it's high up the list of priorities?
No, I don't think so at all.
Right.
Yeah.
Do you think we have an economic competitiveness problem in the state to the degree that we need a special committee to discuss that? I mean, the lieutenant governor and the speaker, among the things that they're not in agreement on, is the need for a focused effort to promote economic competitiveness in the state of Texas. The speaker convened a committee that has now met a couple times. I believe its work is done after this week. The lieutenant governor told one of our reporters and has said publicly elsewhere, I don't think that we need such a committee.
Well, he's afraid of what the committee is going to say.
You believe that he's concerned that they'll support an agenda other than the one
Well, if you put a committee together,
Right.
I mean, you got to be willing to honor their recommendations. That doesn't mean accept them verbatim,
Right.
but you got to honor what they say. And our lieutenant governor doesn't operate that way.
Should Texas be chasing major corporations who want to locate their headquarters here? Amazon is obviously, out on the market now,
Yeah.
and states are offering various baubles and beads to get Amazon's second headquarters and all those jobs here.
Yep.
There are people in state government, including a couple of senators who would be in the body that you would serve as presiding officer, who are absolutely opposed to what they think of as corporate welfare. Why are we giving away state money to corporations? If they want to come, they'll come. Where do you come down on that?
Well, if they want to come, they'll come. But I mean, it's a competitive environment. It's a free market, and so they're free to go wherever they want. And so, you know, if it means some kind of accommodation for a few years to get them here, or some kind of set of accommodations, you know, and just a nice agreement to get them here and to be partners in Texas, I think it's worth getting them, particularly a company like Amazon.
So you're for economic incentives, because, you know, that's been a big discussion over the
Not
course of the last
excessive.
decade. From Perry to Abbott, we've changed the state's view of the value of these economic incentives.
Absolutely. You know what? It happens all the time, everywhere, and it's one of the major decisions when people relocate. We have businesses here in Texas who decide where to expand in what city. We rejected a large business in Rockwall because he had a specific set of incentives that he expected and was a take it or leave it deal, and so we said leave it. But the next community down the road accepted it.
Right. You think it was a mistake for Rockwall to do that?
No.
But it's okay
Not
for somebody else to offer. But I mean, again, it's competitive, right? It's competitive city to city, it's competitive state to state.
Absolutely.
You tweeted not long ago about the lieutenant governor that we needed to get our focus back on a couple of issues, and that's why you were running. And one of those was, let's get our focus back on securing the border. Good gravy. Isn't Dan Patrick's focus on securing the border? What's he not doing on border security that you think we need to do?
Sure.
Seems like that's one of his top issues.
I think many of his top issues are window dressing, frankly. I don't think he's sincerely putting time, energy, and resources into that, and I don't think that he's needling on the federal government enough to do its job.
$800 million out of the state budget in each of the last 2 sessions is not enough focused on border security?
I don't think it comes down to money, and I think we need to figure out where that money is being spent.
What's it come down to?
Right.
Talk about that. Where do you don't think we have adequate information on how the money's being spent?
Exactly. Yeah. It's been allocated, and we're hearing through him that we have all this activity, but the reality is we don't really know what's going on to secure our borders, and frankly, it's not. We need to do all we can as a state, but it's not the state's job to secure a U.S. border. We gotta pull those feds down and put a lot more pressure on them to take care of business, and that's one of the things that I'm pleased about with our current president's priorities.
Do you think we're spending too much or too little on border security in the state right now?
It's hard to say. It depends on what the return is.
Well, you have an opinion?
I think it's too much. I think it's too much state money. Right. Absolutely.
You'd rather see that burden shifted to the federal government?
Yes, sir.
You mentioned traffic earlier. Just yesterday, you tweeted, Texas traffic should not be this bad. Dan Patrick would rather battle over bathrooms than fix our roads. You like to use that bathroom thing just in about every tweet.
Like every other tweet.
How do you fix the roads? We've just allocated some massive amount of money to the transportation department of the state. We seem to have we may have been late to do so, but we seem actually pretty focused on the transportation issue. What would you do that we're not doing?
Well, I need to get to know our TxDOT community. I need to understand what it is that takes so long to allocate resources, why it takes 10 years to build a highway, why we're shutting down roadways, why we have all this. Here's the problem. We're not creating new roadways. We're not looking at long-term solutions to our statewide infrastructure crisis that we've got now, and that's looming ahead because of our booming population. Our population is going to double to about 50 million people over the next 30 years or so.
30 years, that's exactly right. Yeah. How about toll roads? You know, controversial issue in your party and controversial issue in Texas. Are you for toll roads or against?
I'm generally against toll roads. I know that.
Where are you going to get the money to pay for new roads if you're not looking at toll roads? This sounds like magical thinking.
Well, you know what? It's prioritization. It's prioritization. It's looking at the full revenue.
But again, Mr. Wilder, I'm sorry to bust your chops, but I'm actually not sorry to bust your chops.
No, yeah.
You want to spend more money on education. You want to spend more money on transportation. Where is it going to come from?
Right.
You don't want to raise taxes. Where's it going to come from?
Yeah. Well, you know, we're going to have to prioritize. Like I said, we're going to have to prioritize and put together a long-term solution where we can invest in it over time as the revenue presents itself.
Are you pro-life?
Oh, yes, absolutely.
Do you believe that the legislature's approach on reproductive issues has been the proper approach?
Generally, yes.
You and the Lieutenant Governor differ at all on that issue? So if social conservatives are looking at you and the Lieutenant Governor trying to make a choice, and they wonder where you come down on those issues, is there any difference between you and the Lieutenant Governor on the issue of abortion?
I wouldn't say so. I'm pro-life, and I'm against abortion.
Okay.
Yeah.
What about the expansion of Medicaid? We have the highest percentage and the highest raw number of our citizens without health insurance in the country, lower than it was before the Affordable Care Act. But as you know, there's an effort to repeal and replace, or to get rid of the individual mandate, and there are predictions that we could see more than 2 million additional Texans be without health insurance as a consequence of what's happening in Washington now. What is your answer as the Lieutenant Governor to that problem?
Well, Medicaid is an important function in Texas. We have a lot of people who are dependent, disabled. We have young people who are dependent on Medicaid, and so we've got to figure out. We've got to take a look at it and find solutions. But there's also limitations. We got to. I mean.
Well, should you?
Yes.
What if the opportunity presented? It's unlikely under the current administration, but the opportunity presented now, or to build a time machine and go back to when the opportunity presented before, to expand Medicaid. Now I'm doing magical thinking.
Right.
What do you do?
Yeah.
Would you expand Medicaid? Would Lieutenant Governor Milder be a vote for expanding Medicaid?
Yeah, it's a hard question, because you're on the one side you're fiscally responsible, you're conservative thinking, but on the other side you have innocent people, children and disabled people who rely on those services, and so you've got to think about. I mean, you got to weigh both. But the original intent of Medicaid, I think we need to take a look at what the original intent.
So you don't have an answer as to whether we should expand Medicaid?
I wouldn't say that. At this point, and I wouldn't go back to the time machine, but here in 2017, I don't think that we ought to expand Medicaid.
So what's your answer to getting people access to care if not through Medicaid?
It's a good question.
That's why I asked it.
I know. It's another.
You got an answer for me, Lieutenant Governor?
No, you know what? I don't have answers for everything. I mean, that's what makes me a regular Texan. But my answer is I want to pull people in like you and some of these fine folks out here.
I don't vote. So don't spend your time on me. Spend your time on them.
No, I want to pull people together and find solutions together.
Was the sanctuary cities legislation that was the combustible issue of this last session handled properly by the person you intend to defeat? Would you have been at the same place as he was on sanctuary cities?
That's another one I'm generally opposed to.
I'm opposed to sanctuary cities.
I'm opposed to sanctuary
for the
cities.
Legislation that bans sanctuary cities.
With the exception of the line item in there that required the show me your papers on just a simple stop.
So you were for the bill but against the Schaefer Amendment?
Yes, because our law enforcement communities found that a hard pill to swallow.
Right.
Yeah,
so
and I think our law enforcement communities and our local governments need to have the flexibility to take care of their local communities first.
So when the legislation came back over to the Senate for it to be considered with the Schaefer Amendment in it, because you opposed the Schaefer Amendment, you would have made sure that the bill didn't pass? Or would you have accepted the bill, flaws and all?
That's another tough one, Evan. I know it's a tough issue, and it's not one I can solve right here on this stage.
Right, but Mr. Milder, you understand, again.
I do. I understand fully.
Peace to you, Mr. Milder, but the fact is you're running for Lieutenant Governor, and people who are considering whether to vote for you expect that you will have an answer for that question.
Absolutely. Well, like I said, I'm against sanctuary cities. I don't think our cities ought to be harboring.
But you can't say whether you would have supported the bill or would have pushed for the bill to have been voted for with the amendment that you just named in it.
Correct.
Can't say. Okay.
Yep.
Local control. You're a former local official in Rockwall.
Yes.
This is obviously the narrative through line for this last legislative session, the tension between the cities and the states.
Yeah.
Lieutenant Governor Patrick has said in part that the problem is Democrat mayors, his phrasing.
Yeah.
And the idea that this is really about ideology as much as anything, but certainly whether it's the Lieutenant Governor or anybody else in state government of late, they believe that folks like former city council member Milder should be quiet and sit in a corner, and the state should be able to tell you all how to deal with certain issues. What do you think about that?
Well, and that very concept flies in the face of it, of one of the fundamental principles of conservative governance is you want to limit government intrusion into local issues. And allow local communities to decide for themselves what's best for local communities.
There's this old Jeffersonian idea that the best government is the government closest to those governed. On the other hand, at the moment, the view of the state is that it is out of control local officials who are the activists. They're not the conservatives, they're the activists. What do you think about that?
Well, they're making it a partisan issue, obviously, just like everything else that they're making it. But you know what? If the citizens of a more liberal community elect a Democrat mayor and a Democrat council, then they are holding their Democrat local government accountable. And if
so, we should respect the will of the voters.
Absolutely, absolutely. We should not only respect the will of the voters, but certainly ask them, engage them in government decisions.
Mr. Milder, from what I can tell from sitting here with you, you are for spending more money on public education. You're opposed to vouchers. You're opposed to the bathroom bill. You think we should spend more money on transportation. You question whether we're getting a bang for the buck on border security. You are sympathetic to the argument that maybe Medicaid is the answer to the health care problem in the state. You're opposed to the Schaefer Amendment. You're for local control. Why are you not running as a Democrat? Sure sound like a Democrat to me, Mr.
You know what? Like I said when we started, I'm a rational Republican. I'm not looking to raise taxes and spend Texas into bankruptcy. I don't want to do anything like that at all. I just feel like we have a lot of resources in Texas. We have a lot of great people in Texas, and we have a lot of great challenges in Texas. Right. And together we can work through those challenges.
Rather than ask the question in a smart-ass way, which I acknowledge I just did, let me get to the real pragmatic question here, which is, as the presiding officer of the Senate, you don't get a vote.
Right. Yeah.
Unlike the Speaker, if he elects to be one of 150 and vote on an issue, which he has the opportunity to do. Right. You're presiding officer. But as the presiding officer, you appoint committee chairs, and you ultimately lead the body. Yep. Nearly every member of the Republican caucus in the Senate disagrees with you on 80% of the issues. You can't appoint Kel Seliger to be the chairman of every committee, Mr. Milder. What do you do? Yeah. I mean, what do you appoint? If you're opposed to vouchers, do you appoint a pro-voucher chairman of public education? There are almost only pro-voucher Republicans in the Senate. If you're opposed to the bathroom bill, every single Republican voted for the bathroom bill. So as a practical matter, you would be coming in as a Republican, were you to be elected, completely in opposition to everybody you're leading in the caucus on 80% of the issues. How's that work?
Well, I think you're wrong on a couple of levels. Here's what happens in the Senate. And it's through the style of leadership, and leadership's a bit strong of a word, I think, for Dan Patrick. I don't think he leads the Senate. I think he leads through fear and intimidation. And I think, frankly, if we make a change in the lieutenant governor's seat, I think we're going to see different perspectives in some of our senators.
You think Larry Taylor, if he's chair of public education, is going to be any less pro-voucher with you in the chair? You think Joan Huffman's going to be any less pro-bathroom bill with you in the chair?
I do.
Really?
I think that I certainly think they won't pursue it with the vigor that they pursued it this time around, because they're trying to please their lieutenant governor.
You know, the knock on the Speaker is that although he doesn't, Speaker says, I control the House, I lead the House by the will of the voters, by the will of the members, right? Mm-hmm. The members ultimately lead the House. But the knock on him is he appoints committee chairs whose perspectives align with his own perspectives. So he's not for choice, school choice. Mm-hmm. So he appoints an anti-voucher public ed chair in Jimmy Aycock or in Dan Huberty. Mm-hmm. He's not for the bathroom bill, so he makes sure that Byron Cook is the head of state affairs, and so that thing is going to get taken care of. Right. That is the criticism of the Speaker. Would we be looking for the same thing from Lieutenant Governor Milder? Would you be looking to have your agenda reflected in the committee appointments that you make, or the chairman appointments that you make, chair appointments, so that you would be ultimately controlling legislation the way they criticize, many of the people you'd be leading in the Senate criticize Speaker Strauss for doing?
Mm-hmm. Well, to a certain degree, I think the answer to that is obvious. I think yes. But like you said, I mean, you've only got...
So you're asking Republicans to vote for your agenda because your agenda would ultimately become the Senate's agenda?
I will use reason, and I would debate the issues on merit with my senators. Yeah. I believe I can make a case for many of the issues that I support and don't support. I think I can make a case. Yeah. And I think if we You know, I've used the phrase before. I think if we make a change at the top, I think the whole climate in the Senate changes.
So I mentioned that you had said some personal things about Dan Patrick. You've talked a lot about issues. You have called Dan Patrick, and it's only December 7th. I mean, we're still got a lot of time. You have called Dan Patrick an extremist.
Yes.
You've called him an entertainer. You've called him a jackass. And you've called him the unkindest cut of all, a fake conservative. That's probably the one he hates the most. Are you going to litigate this race as on the basis of personalities?
No, I'm really going to focus. Well, I'm hoping not to.
Well, it seems like you're doing it without.
No, I know. No, but it's
a little early to be calling him a jackass, isn't it?
Well, to be fair, when right, that was before I'd decided to run, but. And I don't take that back. So,
you stand behind all those things?
I stand behind all those things, and you know what? He knows. I mean, he knows how this works. He knows what kind of leader he is.
Right.
He knows exactly what he's doing, and I'm just one of the few people out there who's willing to call him out on it publicly.
So you like Speaker Strauss? You've indicated that.
Sure.
Right?
Yeah,
and you understand that is a red line for a lot of members of the Senate.
I get
You're
it.
not endearing yourself
Sure.
to your future colleagues in the Senate by saying nice things about Speaker.
No.
What about Governor Abbott? Governor Abbott agrees with the Lieutenant Governor on almost every single issue that you've enumerated.
Yeah.
A difference between you and the Lieutenant Governor. Is Governor Abbott also a jackass?
No. Governor Abbott is not a jackass. He does not conduct himself.
Are you going to support Governor Abbott in this election?
I am.
But he disagrees with you on everything.
Well, yeah. Okay, so we have a bully in our lieutenant governor's office right now.
There's another name.
Yeah, we do. But it's an accurate label.
Yeah.
I mean, he's a bully politician. He's bullied politics, and I believe he's bullying the governor as well. And I have respect for. Well, I have respect for everybody who serves because they're all serving for a reason. We differ on a lot of issues and in the way that some of them conduct themselves. Yeah. But our governor shows class in the way that he governs, whether we agree or not on some of the issues. And I've been disappointed in some of the governor's
So then it is about personality and not substance.
No,
because if it were about substance, you'd be opposing Governor Abbott.
It's not about personality. It's about conduct.
It's about demeanor.
Yeah, Texas is the friendly state, right? We're the friendship state.
Right.
And Dan Patrick doesn't understand that. He doesn't get it. And so he pushes and he bullies and he says, this is the way we're doing it, and he's not open to discussion, he's not open to reason. And there are a lot of Texans who want a change and want somebody who represents the values of Texas, that friendship state values, those Southern values, people who, regardless of differences in opinions on issues and everything else, that we have respect for one another, we can debate respectfully and civilly.
Okay. We're going to go to questions here in the audience in a second. Can
you
win this race with only the votes of Republicans, the primary?
I think so, yeah.
Right.
We got a lot of Republicans in Texas.
What if you knew that you could beat Dan Patrick in the primary primarily with the votes of Democratic crossovers? Would you be okay with that?
Here's the thing, Evan. People ask me, one of the biggest questions I get asked is, who are your voters? And they expect me to say, well, they're Democrats crossing over. But that's not it, and there's going to be some of that probably, but not a lot. There's not going to be a lot of that. My voters are Texans. They are Texans who are just fed up with the government, the gridlock, particularly in our Senate. They're tired, and they want to see some change. And so my voters are Texans. They're Republicans. They're rational. They're regular Republicans. They're Main Street Republicans. They're independents.
And
they're libertarians.
And there are enough of those to defeat Dan Patrick in the primary in your mind. Can you raise enough money to be competitive?
Absolutely.
How much do you have to raise?
I think less than $1 million.
Less than $1 million?
Absolutely. Here's the thing. You know the old story, David and Goliath, right? Right? Goliath showed up in his 200 pounds worth of armor and his 100-pound sword and his big old, all this stuff, and he stood there. And David knew he was offered armor, but David, little guy, he couldn't do anything with all that armor. He'd just fall over. He'd be stuck. And so he knew he could not take on Goliath in the same traditional manner that Goliath was expecting David to take him on. And so David showed up in his shorts, t-shirt, and flip-flops, and a sling.
They had flip-flops back then.
Yeah, they did. They're sandals now.
Right.
Yeah.
Slingshots aren't free, though. You know that.
Yeah, I get it. But only took one slingshot.
Questions? Please put your hand up. We'll be happy to call on you. Gentleman here in the
Yes.
front, and then gentleman here over to the right. Sir.
Sort of building on the previous question, you can't be elected lieutenant governor unless you're on the ballot in November. Wouldn't you have an easier time getting to the ballot in November as an independent with crowdsourcing and social media than trying to run in a polarized Republican primary?
All you would need to get on the ballot in the fall is a proper number of signatures. Hell, Kinky Friedman got enough signatures. I mean, if he can get enough signatures, right?
Right.
Couldn't you get on the ballot as an independent?
Well, I could, but I couldn't win. I mean, what would be the point of that?
Well, why couldn't you win?
The reason I'm taking Dan Patrick on in the Republican primary is because it's the only place he can be beat, and it's the only race that can change the tone of our Senate to be more friendly towards Texans and particularly more respectful towards public education and everybody out there.
So you're saying you couldn't beat him in a fall election, but you could beat him in a primary election?
Well, a fall election is Republican versus Democrat. And in Texas, the politics haven't shifted enough.
You put a third party in there, all that does is divide up the anti-Dan Patrick vote.
Exactly. Right. Exactly. Yeah.
Sir.
Early on, you talked about term limits where you were before. Mm-hmm. Two parts to this question. One, do you think the lack of term limits in our legislature, our Congress, and here in Texas is the reason why we have this patchwork every 2 years? And would you be in favor of term limits once you're in?
Yes, I do, and yes, I would.
Right, but see, but don't we already have term limits, Mr. Mulder? They're called elections. If the public wants somebody out of office, look, I mean, and let's again, with respect, I looked this up.
Yeah.
You served 2 terms on the Rockwall City Council. You did not serve 3.
No, I did not.
The reason you didn't serve 3 is you were defeated.
Absolutely.
Okay?
That's true.
The reason that you were defeated, I'm told by people in Rockwall, because I made calls, is nothing controversial. I was told it was local politics. The head of the chamber beat you, ran against you, beat you. It was a friendly race. There was nothing controversial. There's no scandal. You just lost. Isn't that a term limit? Why do we need term limits? Why don't you give the voters the opportunity to decide who they want in office and for how long?
I stood my ground on an issue that the mayor was very passionate about, and I opposed him on it, and he rallied a group of people in Rockwall to free up my future.
Isn't that a term limit?
No, that's not a term limit.
Well, but I mean, here's my point.
It's not.
We have, I said something about experience. In politics these days, experience is as much a liability as it is a strength. And the reality is that if somebody is term limited out, often you're sending them back home at a time when they are at their maximum potential to do good because they have experience. That's one theory about this. So why would you want to limit the ability of voters to decide who they want to have in office?
Because the system under which some of our career politicians is rigged heavily in their favor. For example, in my race, I'm a regular working guy. I don't have $20 million in the bank to run a campaign and defeat my opponent. And so the chances, even though Patrick got elected with 500,000 votes, and that's all he's going to need to win this time around. And he's going to spend he's not going to spend all of it, but he's going to spend a good chunk of his money, protecting his territory.
Right.
And for somebody to have a legitimate challenge and to present their case for why we need a change, it's
right.
Yeah. I mean,
but of course, Mr. Milder, you remember surely how Dan Patrick got into this job. He beat an incumbent. It's not impossible. The system isn't rigged. It happens.
It's not impossible if you got a radio show and you're blasting your name all over the market for every single day.
So that's really the issue in this case.
That's one.
Okay.
Sure. Yeah.
Other questions? Ms. Lava right there in the middle. I can always count on Ms. Lava.
I knew her daughter growing up.
I heard that.
Yeah.
Went to high school together. Yes, Ms. Lava.
I've decided if I'm going to run for any political office, I'm going to get a lot of practice before I come before Evan, just so you know.
Right?
I'm kind of a jerk.
No, you're fair. You're fair.
The federal government right now is cutting back on a lot of what it does, environmentally, educationally, how it's funding. And a lot of that's going to go back to the states. not necessarily with the money to do it, but with the needs that
Right.
have to be done. So if that continues, healthcare, environmental issues, all of that, how do you see Texas stepping up, if it's going to step up, to
Right.
take on some of those issues?
Yeah, Ms. Love is identifying what I think you talked about in a different fashion earlier. That is that the responsibility for taking on a lot of issues has rolled downhill from the state to local communities. Education funding, for instance.
Yep.
Well, at the federal level, that same thing is happening. We consider the fact that we're a low-tax, low-service state to be a feature and not a bug. So what happens when this low-tax, low-service state takes on the responsibility of a lot of these issues that the federal government stops taking care of? What happens?
Yeah.
What do you do?
It puts a squeeze on our state for sure, but you know what? It's something that we've just got to figure out as a state, as a community of Texans together. We got to step up and take care of our own if the federal government's not going to continue the program, funding the programs that it's funding. And so you know, we got to pull together and work together in the Senate and the House to figure out what needs to be addressed. And I'm campaigning on that. I'm not campaigning on, hey, I'm this mythical being with all the answers. That's not what I'm campaigning on at all. I'm campaigning on the fact that we have a lot of issues to address, and more coming down. And we've got to work together. We just got to work together and figure out what we need to do as a group of Texans.
Are we done? We have time? Let's take one more question right here.
Okay.
Ma'am.
I'm going to give you a question that has not been answered by any legislator in all the years that we've been around. The Legislative Budget Board, when they need money, they go to the retired state employees of the state of Texas. Right now, they owe us $29 billion, and nobody bothers to pay it. It's just, well, we're going to take another 3% or whatever. You are on the LBB. You're one of those people that's going to be making a decision.
Yep.
It's time that somebody stood up for us and said, hey, we promised you that if you would stay with the state of Texas and retire and do your job, we would take care of you. You're not.
Yep.
And I'm at 84 years old and worked for the state of Texas for 38 years, and now I'm a lobbyist. I still can't get anybody to answer me, but since you're running, you might decide there's enough state employees, retired and still working, that would vote for you if you said, let's work on it.
What about that? If you try avoiding my answers, that's fine. Try avoiding that answer.
Well, first and foremost, I think we've got to honor our commitment as a state to our retirees. You know, we pledged to them through a lifelong career serving the state, and so we got to return that favor to our retirees. Exactly how we do that, I don't know, but I do know that retirees at all levels, from a state service, whether it's state employees and public school teacher retirees and such, they've been cheated for a long time, and I'm well aware of that, and retiree issues are top of mind as I move through this campaign.
But if I asked you where you can get the money from to make the retired employees whole, you're not going to have any.
I do not have the answer for that yet.
Okay,
yes,
just checking.
yeah,
All right, good.
Yeah.
Mr. Milder,
Yeah.
you survived. Very
I survived.
Good. We are done. Please give Scott Milder a big hand. Thank you very much for coming. We'll see you again. Good.
All right.
Thank you very
Thanks,
much.
Evan. All right.
Appreciate it.
Appreciate it, man.
Good.
All right.
Thanks.
All righty.